Nancy,
Okay.
go ahead.
Yeah, so welcome everybody to the latest installment of our APS Division of Biological Physics online sessions. I'm Nancy Ford, and I am a professor of physics at Simon Fraser University, but also the chair of our engagement committee. So before I turn it over to Ajay to run the show today, I just wanted to share how you can find out about future and past events. So let me just share my screen here and show you all, if you are not already aware, the Division of Biological Physics has a web page, and if you Google APS DBIO, you will get this as your top hit. Lots of information here, but particularly I'll draw your attention to this workshops and networking button. And if you click on that, it takes you to a page of listing all the events we've held over the last year and a half. If you've missed any of these, you can click on it and access a recording of the event. And this particular event is also getting recorded. So you don't have to take copious notes. You can always go and review it later. The link will be up soon. And I also wanted to draw your attention to the next event that is next month, which is already available for registration. And this is non-academic careers. So we are indeed letting you know about all types of career options and career paths. So if you're interested in learning about that, the Zoom link is live. We will update with all the panelists shortly, but that promises to be a good event as well. And finally, I should remind you that the registration deadline for abstract submission is coming up very soon for the March meeting. And so hopefully we'll get to see a lot of you in person there. So with that, I will turn the floor over to Ajay, who is coordinating today's event.
Right. Thank you, Nancy. So for those of you who might have tuned in just a little bit late, this is indeed the, I don't know if you can see my screen. Yeah, this is indeed the virtual panel on preparing for and navigating the academic job market. And we are very, very, very fortunate to have such an accomplished panelists here. And I am Ajay Gopinathan. I'm a professor of physics and also chair-elect of DBIO, and I'll be moderating the session with the panel of accomplished people here that we have. From a wide range of institutions, from primarily undergraduate to public to private universities, and from all experience levels, starting from somebody who has just started their first tenure track position all the way to a member of the National Academy. So without further ado, let me actually introduce our panelists, and they can, I will stop sharing and they can say hi. First up, we have Andrea Liu, who is a professor in physics and the director of the Center for Soft and Living Matter at UPenn. And she is a member of National Academy, and she uses a combination of analytical theory and computation to study soft and living matter. Andrea, do you want to say hi? You can
hi.
Yes, so people can see. And then next up, we have Hernan Garcia, who is an associate professor in the Department of Physics and Molecular Cell Biology at UC Berkeley. And he is interested broadly in research and teaching in physical biology, and you may know him from the textbook on physical biology. So Hernan, you want to say hi?
Hello, everybody. It's great to be here.
Yeah. And next up, we have Ray Robertson-Anderson, who's a professor of physics and biophysics and associate provost of Engaged Scholarship at the University of San Diego. And she studies she's an experimentalist who studies the microscale mechanics and dynamics of biopolymer networks and active soft matter systems. Hi, Ray. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And next up, we have Jenny Ross, who's a professor and chair of the Department of Physics at Syracuse, who is another experimentalist who studies a wide range of processes of active and biological physics underlying cellular organization. Jenny.
Hello, how are you all?
Hello, and welcome to you too. And last but not least, we have Suraj Shankar, who is an LSA collegiate fellow and incoming assistant professor in physics at the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor, was previously a junior fellow at Harvard, and he is a theorist who studies how collective phenomena emerge in soft materials and living systems.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Ajay, for organizing this.
No, thank you all. And I would like to thank all the panelists again for agreeing to do this, and we're very fortunate to have you. So what I'm going to do is start off by asking a very broad question before we drill into the nitty-gritty of actually going through the application process and the interviews and so on. I just want to take a step back and start with a time well before this. So the first question is for you, Andrea, and it has to do with, let's say a student is thinking about an academic career, and they're faced with a wide range of choices of kinds of institutions with different kinds of workload and work expectations from faculty, serving different demographics. And they want to align that with their own interests and passions. And what would be your advice for them? Like, where would they start to even think about these things? And what should they be focusing on?
Yeah. So I think the first big decision, right, is, how passionate you feel about teaching versus research. Where do you fall on that balance? Do you want to apply to, R1 and R2 universities, where there's a lot of research, or would you rather go to like a private college? So that's,
Yeah.
I think that's the first thing that, and how important is really doing high-powered research to you? Because I think there are a lot of good jobs in academic institutions that don't come with the resources to do a whole lot of research, but where people can have very rewarding careers. So
Sounds great. So I just follow up with that. I think, Ray, would you want to follow up? Were there some things that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I guess I would say that another really important aspect is just the size of the university. Like what time, because you will be doing some research and teaching, and do you want to be somewhere, do you like this like kind of one-on-one interaction with students in small classes, or would you rather be teaching a class of 500 students? And also the size of the department. And so I think it's kind of easy to just lump schools into like different classes, but it's really important to to talk to faculty members there, because even schools that might look very similar at the face can be quite different. And then also I would just say there's a lot of universities that are sort of in between, teaching focused and research focused, where you have, so like if you decide you want to be somewhere teaching focused, then sort of look at those institutions and say how much research is required, because there are lots of schools, there are some schools that you really don't need to do much research at all. There are other ones where they require a lot more research. And so there's a large scale. So think about, which the size of the school, what are the and how much time you want to devote to research versus teaching. And yeah, just keep in mind that the schools are different. And so I'd recommend reaching out to people that they're just talking to faculty members there.
Great.
I guess there's also, I think AJ, on your list, you mentioned community colleges too. I mean, if you really just want to teach and you're sick of research, then community colleges, they have the tenure track positions in community colleges are solely teaching, but usually you don't have a lot of upper division course offerings there.
Right. Great. Yeah, thanks, Ray. That was really informative. And I think just to add on to that, there could also be purely teaching kinds of positions even at R1. There are, for example, in the UC system, there are teaching professors. So the primary objective is teaching, but you're still part of an R1 university and you have a different set of students that you're serving. And it's also important, geography and things like that, which we'll come to later, and the demographics of the students that you're serving and what impact you're having may also resonate with your own values. So those are all kind of factors that a student might want to think about. And of course, as Andrea and Ray pointed out, talk to people who, and find out about these institutions. All right, so the next question, still in the slightly earlier phase, is talking about something that we all think about, which is networking and building relationships. So basically early career preparation. So the question is to Hernan, and the question is, is it important? I mean, for industry jobs, we all think about, oh, it's really important to network. Is this important for academic jobs? And if it is, how can prospective faculty members build a strong professional network within their field early in your career, like when you're a graduate student or a postdoc? And what kind of strategies can you use to connect and increase your visibility? So, Hernan?
Yeah, no, I think it is important, and maybe it's sometimes unfortunate because it does tend to select for people that tend to be more and is more easily connect, and maybe that selects against a type of people that could contribute just as nicely to science. But I think it is the reality, and I think it's very important to be proactive. In my experience, even though professors are busy, I remember when I was a postdoc, if you just email them cold and say, hey, can I take you out to lunch so I can show you what I'm doing? The people want to be helpful. They're just busy, and one just needs to be proactive. But in my experience, being proactive early on, in grad school, you're still building a little bit of confidence, but even in grad school, but for sure during a postdoc, being able to connect with people that go, beyond your postdoctoral mentor, as a means to do a checkup, like, do you think this is reasonable? This is a good plan? And then even as you start thinking early on of your research program, do you think this is a good idea? I just read this very interesting book called Think Again. I forgot the author. And, the guy emphasizes the idea of having a challenge network. You want to
Adam
have...
Grant.
There you go. I really enjoyed it. And, I thought that one of the things I got out of it is this idea of really having a challenge network so that you don't hear like you're doing great all the time, right? Like to be told, no, maybe you should change this or that. So I think it's super important. And in terms of increasing visibility, I think it's good to, first of all, at your home institution, to again reach out to other people, but also at other institutions if you happen to be in town or you just want to visit somebody, that also works. And also in attending conferences, once again, I think it requires a little bit of overcoming the potential barrier of can I email this person and all that? But for the most part, again, everybody, this is all about paying it forward. So, people have been helped similarly, even those that are now at very high career stages.
Great. Thanks, Hernan. And I think I'm going to let Suraj follow up, since he's the one who most recently went through this gauntlet.
Yeah, so I think I'm just going to reiterate largely what Hernan already mentioned, which is, one is talking to people, and sort of self-advocacy is very important, but it's also very hard. It's often preferences people who find it easier to be more social and talk to people. And so this is where I think mentors become very important. So talk to your PhD advisors, your postdoc mentors, any other mentors you may have in your institute or elsewhere, and have them advocate for you. And try to have them suggest you to give talks in places, or review papers, or participate in events organized by, say, DBIO or various other society committees or events that you may be part of. Also, I think there's differences between fields and departments. In physics and biological physics, of course, APS, Biophysics Society, those meetings are the sort of big meetings where everyone comes, and so those are good opportunities to meet and talk to prospective mentors and collaborators, and also for advertising if and when you are on the market. But for engineering, for instance, in chemical engineering, they have different strategies and different ways of going around this. And for instance, IKE has usually during their conference, they have a session for junior or faculty candidates to advertise their work and oftentimes a lot of searching and selections of prospective candidates happens in these conferences. So keep an eye out and know the audience and plan for how you want to build this network of yours depending on the field you are in.
Great.
Can I just add something to
Andrea,
that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, like for example, the APS has this lunch with experts, right? And I've actually hired 2 or 3 postdocs that I first met when they sat at my table for lunch. So that's a way. Another thing is, asking questions in seminars. And meetings. It's something that's very hard to do. It takes a lot of practice, but group meetings are a great way to start practicing where you can feel very safe to start asking questions. And it's not something that you're necessarily born knowing how to ask good questions. It's something that takes practice, like everything else. And so I think that's a great way to do it as well.
Yes. Thanks, Andrea, and thanks, Suraj and Anand. Yes, all great tips. And yeah, I'd like to actually just selfishly point out that APS DBIO, we have events, and we are happy to have early career people involved in our activities. And there's a session about how to do that, and you can reach out to us. Anyway, I will now.
And if we're plugging, AJ, we have our cross division.
Yes,
no, our very first cross division early career meet and greet at this year's March meeting. It's going to be on Tuesday afternoon, and it's DBIO and DSoft and DPoly and GSMP. And so there's going to be it's a great opportunity to come and network and talk to faculty members and other people in the field and meet other people like you. But yeah, it's a great networking opportunity that's also like, not as intimidating as trying to ask a question, which I think, like Andrea's point, is amazing. Yeah, but anyway, first cross division event, very excited.
Yes, indeed. And thanks, Ray, for making it happen. All right, so now what I'm going to do is actually get into the nitty-gritty. We're going to talk a little bit about timeline and so on. So I'm just going to share my screen, and so, okay. All right. All right, and so, all right, so this is just a rough timeline that put up, courtesy Chris Kello here, one of my colleagues. It's very broad and rough timeline, basically because different departments, and this is especially true for an interdisciplinary field like biological physics, where you might be applying to very many different kinds of departments. So the timelines will change depending on that. But generically, July is when these tenure track job postings begin. And then there's this big span when applications are due. It could even be as early as September all the way through typically January, depends on when the jobs are posted. And then November through February is the time when there's typically long list interviews. So nowadays, a lot of this is done by Zoom, and in some fields, they're actually, as I think Suraj mentioned, some of it is done even at a national conference. And then once that happens, kind of December through March roughly is when you have shortlisted candidates. So this could be like 4 to 6 people or even less, depending on the institution, who are actually invited to campus for interviews. And we'll talk about that in detail a little bit later. And of course, again, depending on institution, timelines, February to May are when offers are typically made for tenure track positions. And the one common thing is that almost always the job begins in summer, unless like July 1st, unless you negotiate a different start date. So that's what the timeline looks like. And what is it? So this brings us to things that you have to think about. Like there are factors that you can control and those that you cannot control. And so the things that you cannot control, like all markets, many things are out of your control. So what jobs get posted, you have no say, could be determined by funding, history, deans, departmental politics, what the department is looking for. Sometimes, it could be very broad and even the department doesn't know what it's looking for. They're looking for some candidate who checks, who basically excites them. also could depend on who's in the search committee, who else applies for these positions. These are things you cannot control. But while you cannot control these things, knowing about some of these things could actually help you, kind of tailor your application and your approach to the interview at these places. And so that comes down to things that you can, in fact, control, which is, your researcher card, obviously, but also things like teaching experience, putting together your CV and all your rest of your job materials, which we'll talk about in detail, letter writers, and making sure you have them all lined up. And then what we were just talking about, kind of branding or reputation or networking and trying to get, yourself visible. So these are all kinds of things that are in your control. We'll talk about in a little bit. And of course, I should point out that one of the first stops you can always make at wherever you are, your campus probably has career services office, a graduate division office or something. And then of course you have senior mentors. And I've also put together, and this is for people who can, look it up later, some of the resources that I found really useful. One is from UCSF and another from UPenn. Is just a how-to guide for job applications. So that's what I just wanted to say. And what I'm going to do now is stop sharing. And I think, Ray, was there anything you wanted to follow up on that with? Because we're going to talk about research statements now. But if you wanted to talk about CVs and cover letters for a little bit, that would be great.
Yeah, actually, that was something I was going to say. Well, first of all, I would say start looking early, because some of these things, some of the applications, you saw that broad timeline, but, start looking in like June or July, and because sometimes the applications will be due in September, so they will sneak up on you. But also, when you're preparing your application, make your cover letter for that position, because that is a red flag if you just have a blanket cover letter and you're sending it the same cover letter to all the institutions. It is very clear that you do not actually, or at least when the review committee is looking at your application, they do not think that you're actually taking this job seriously. So make sure in your cover letter you explain why you want that job, not just a job. And also I would recommend reaching out to some of these departments. Because they're going to get a big stack of applications. So if they can put a face to a name or a conversation to a name, that's really great. If a place is local, if you can contact the chair and say, hey, can I come visit your department? Do that, or just reach out to them in email and say I'm really interested in this position. Do you have a time to set up can I talk to you a little more about what the position entails, just to show your interest. And then maybe you talk to the person on the phone, or you visit and you think oh, this I'm not interested in this place at all. And then it saves you time from having to apply and go through the whole process. And maybe you love it, and maybe they love you and they already know something about you. So I would just say again, be proactive, and make your cover letters very much tailored to the position, and try to reach out and express your interest, and ask questions. And then I guess for the same advice with the CV, if you're going to be applying to, say, teaching focused universities and R1s, because maybe you're not sure which way you want to lean, tailor your CV to the position that you're going for. Highlight, focus more, make sure your publications and all your research accolades are front and center. For the R1s, if you're focused more on teaching universities, make sure they have more information on if you any TA experience or teaching experience or anything like that. So it's more work, but it's definitely worth it.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and I'd like to reiterate, in fact, that tailoring is very important, and making your CV and this pop is actually quite important. And you wouldn't believe I've seen applications with the wrong institution there. And
yeah.
Okay.
Most people don't know, most people don't know USD exists. So we routinely in the cover letter say I'm interested in this position at UCSD. We are not UCSD.
All right, Erna.
Next.
I just wanted to reiterate how important it is to do your homework. One thing that I did, for example, when I was applying for jobs, was to have my standard application, but then have little areas of customization, and I had those in red so I wouldn't forget to customize them accordingly. And it takes time. it took like a few hours per institution because you want to read what people are doing, you want to figure out what the connections are, right? I also like the idea of contacting people, but one reminder, one thing I was thinking about when doing that is that remember that there's a time for every sort of question, and that each step is meant to get you to the next step. The first thing you're trying to get is be invited for an interview. So if you contact somebody asking them about housing in the area, if you contact me about it, I know that it's a mess at Berkeley housing, but I'm going to be turned off because right now the point is the first thing is to get people excited about the science. Yeah,
and don't ask about salary.
It's not something exactly.
Or worse, or worse, don't ask about retirement packages.
Oh, yeah.
That has also happened, so I have to say. So
just keeping in mind that each step of the application is meant to get you to the next step of the process.
Sure. Yeah, I think I'd also invite Jenny to chime in. She's a department chair right now, so if there's something else you wanted to say.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think I cringed a little bit when Ray was like, reach out and ask if you can come and visit. Don't do that at Syracuse because we don't have the time. I'm sorry, we don't have the time. I mean, we're not, I know that Ray's like in a different kind of, but like when people email me and let me know that they've submitted, I'll just say, I understand, because the other thing is I can't like, I don't want to like necessarily show like preference for like one person over the other when we have like a really big search and we have a lot of people who are applying, right? And I don't want that person to think somehow they have a leg up because they, you know what I mean? Like there's some like fairness work that I'm trying to do here. There's some equity work. And so, but what we tend to do in order to get people like to recruit people is that, you know, we will sometimes invite folks like the year before we think we have an opening up in that field. And that's what us trying to recruit, because we do want to have some of the best people and really we're looking also for diversity. And so a lot of times people who are more diverse, like they're not going to apply to a place that they've never interacted with because they don't know what they're like. And so we do that usually. But usually if somebody emails me and just lets me know, gives me a heads up that they applied, or if their advisor sends me an email being like, this person applied, I wrote them a letter, I just kind of write back like, thanks for the heads up. I'm not on the committee. So it's really up to the committee to decide. I'm just the department chair, right? And so it's kind of different before the job opens. It's kind of like when a grant is out, right? Like before the grant is out, like you can talk anything you want to some of the program officers. And then when it's open, they kind of have a little limited amount that they can talk to you, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But that, again, it's different, I think, at small places and big versus, larger places. And, certainly Syracuse doesn't get as many applications as when I was at UMass, and we would get a bunch, but most of them didn't fit. And that's also a problem because now we've got 300 applications and literally 95% of them are saying hard condensed matter when we have a soft condensed matter position open, right? And so, or something like that, right? Like, so like we're going through, we're having to read all these things and try to make sure, oh, this one says quantum. Okay, throw it in the trash because we're not actually looking for that this year. And so I would say that making it easy on us for when you are applying to that big place, and by tailoring your cover letter will be very helpful. So my apology. I mean, this is all a bio crowd. So if you're a bio crowd and you're applying to a quantum position, just know that they might not look. But at a small place where they don't necessarily know which kind of physics they want, I think there's some real big appeal for biophysics because it's tabletop. But yeah, sorry.
Sounds great. No, that's great. Yeah. And I think I would say that you might want to be a little careful about reaching out in terms of, sometimes committee members don't want to be called. You should just direct any inquiries to the chair and nobody else. So there's something like that. It's okay, I think, to reach out to people you may have known in your network. So this is why networking is important. So if you know somebody at that institution, definitely you can reach out to them. Hey, I saw this ad, I want to chat with you. That's okay because you have a connection with this person already. So I think that's...
Yeah, honestly, I don't know how much that helps.
It probably, for you can find out more about it if you know somebody there.
If you know somebody, maybe you can find out more. They're probably not going to tell you very much that they wouldn't, So all that networking, I mean, I think in the end, it really comes down to the application.
Yeah, and that is what we're going to talk about now.
Great.
So that's the next question. So nice segue into the next question, which is about so we talked about cover letter, CV, tailoring it to the institution and being careful about it. And so the next question, of course, is one of the main components of your application package is your research statement. And so this question is for you, Andrea. It is basically, what should you include in a research statement? And particularly, how do you make it stand out?
Yeah. So this is actually something I try to practice within my group, is that, you know, you want to put forth a vision that is really special to you, and that, you know, basically all of your past experiences are leading you to this point, and nobody else can have this vision. So that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of thinking to think, okay, how did the work that I did in my PhD and my postdoc, yeah, how does this all lead to this vision that came out? Because anything you do was influenced by what you did before. And so you need to get across what is special about your vision and sets you apart from everybody else.
Right.
It really gets people excited about it. So, you know, you have to explain, why is it important? Why is it interesting? Which are two different things. Okay. And yeah.
Yeah, sounds great. I think we have a follow-up. I think it's Hernan, if you wanted to follow up on that.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And, you know, this is particularly relevant to the DBIO crew, for some of you that apply for K99 type of things. There is nothing more off-putting in a chalk talk than somebody telling you these are the aims of my K99. I do not want to hear about your K99. I want to hear about the big picture. You know, what's the exciting thing that you're going to do that nobody can do. And I loved what Andrea said in terms of crafting, if you can, at least this worked for me, crafting a question in a way that everybody agrees it's interesting, but also they agree you're the only person for the job. You know, and that takes time, and that takes practice, and that takes also engaging early on with people. Like, oh, this year I've read, like, I think already 5 research statements from people that are not in my group that just asked me for feedback. So that goes back to the challenge network. One thing also relevant to this crew is it is not the same to write a research statement for a biology, a bioengineering, or a physics department. So I think you need to think really hard about just writing a different statement for each one of those. And I know it's extra work, but, you know, it's nice that you have a bigger cross section. So in general, the thing that I'd like to ask is, you know, what does victory look like? You know, if I gave you, like, you know, a few $1 million, the keys to the lab, and 3 students, you get everything done. So now what happens? You know, so like, that's the type of thing I think you should be, that would be important to aim for. And the last thing, and I think this is important throughout the, you know, for sure when you're at the interview level, but even here to start giving a vision of that is, when I was at Princeton, you know, Bill Bialik gave me probably one of the best pieces of advice for looking for jobs, which is there's a difference between wanting to read somebody's papers and wanting to have that person down the hall. And you want to show that you're going to be a great colleague to interact with. In the assistant level, most people are going to be trying to support you. But at the same time, you want to show that you're going to be part of the community, because otherwise you can't just read your papers when you're somewhere else.
Yeah, great points. Thanks, Andrea and Hernan. Is there anybody else who wanted to follow up? If not, I'll just go on to, yeah, and again, I think I'd also emphasize, sorry.
Can I mention one thing?
Yes.
Just also in your research statement, something important, especially if you're like applying for smaller universities, make sure you've thought about like a budget. I mean, you don't need to really like put this in your research statement, but I mean, you need to know if what you're proposing to do, make sure it's feasible at the place that you're applying, that you have the time and the resources to do what you're proposing to do. So again, that goes back to doing your homework. But, you know, if you're going to be at a small university that doesn't have a lot of infrastructure, you can't be proposing to do, you know, you can't be proposing research that requires a $2 million startup package, because you're not going to get that. So just keep in mind. And if you are applying to somebody where you might get a $2 million startup package, then you need to say, like, you need to show that your research is at that caliber. So just make sure that your research statement, again, when you're tailoring applications, make sure that you tailor your research statement to the institution.
Yeah, and just to follow up, one thing is that, you know, for biological physics, you can apply to many different kinds of departments. We talked about that before, disciplines, and you need to craft your statement for that discipline But how do you do that? How do you know how to do that? I just wanted to say a practical thing. But it's really helpful to go to seminars. For example, if you're applying to a bioengineering department, but you come from physics, go to some bioengineering seminars at your institution and listen to it's like, what are they excited about? Try to get some feel for that. Because you'll pick up on what they like. Right. And then it's not a question of changing your research plans to fit what they like. No, it's a way of communicating your research plans in a way that they will, they will resonate with.
Yeah. Yes. Well put. Thanks, Andrea. Okay. So yes, and again, we are all reiterating tailoring things to the place that you're applying to. So yeah, take that into account. Take into account the department, the size of the institution, the kind of students that they're serving, and the resources that are available when crafting your plans as well. All right, so the next thing is, okay, this is actually somewhat challenging, is the teaching statement, especially when, as depends on your training, but typically you don't have too much teaching experience and you have to craft a teaching statement, put out your teaching philosophy and kind of tailor it to those institutions as well. So the lead for this is Ray. So I'm just going to post that question to you about how to craft a teaching statement and are there things I can do as a student to raise my teaching profile, get better experience.
Yeah, so again, tailoring. So when you're describing your research philosophy and so your your teaching statement, it should conclude your philosophy, what you want students to get out of your classes, but are you gonna be teaching mainly undergraduates or graduate students? And are you gonna be teaching a class of 30 students or a class of 300 students? So you need to kind of need to know that to how you're going to actually implement your teaching philosophy in the classroom. So I think that's the biggest thing. And then also, if you don't really know, maybe you don't have much experience, do a little research. I mean, like physics education research is, there's a huge body of literature looking at what are best practices for teaching, but more than that, there's lots of seminars. Like at the APS March meeting, there's tons of sessions on teaching physics, and there's lots of resources online. So if you don't really know what you're doing, just do a little research and figure out visit classes of people and just figure out what you think might work. And it doesn't have to be like, this is what I'm going to do, because it's going to change, but just show that you've thought about what you want students to get out of teaching and make it a little unique, like what's something that you might bring to the classroom that maybe somebody else wouldn't, and yeah, so I guess that's mainly my main advice, is that it doesn't have to be, as long as you can express some like genuine desire to educate students, and that you have some knowledge of not just the literature, but some knowledge of like current understanding of teaching, like things like flipped classrooms and active engagement and all that kind of stuff. Those are important things to kind of to talk about. And again, if you're applying somewhere where teaching is, the number one criteria for tenure rather than research, then your teaching statement has to be a lot more, has to be, that's your strongest, that's going to be the number one thing that they look at. So again, for your institution, you need to be putting in more effort in your teaching statement if that's going to be the main thing that you're evaluated on. So yeah, I guess that's that's my main advice.
Yeah. Thanks, Ray. And I'll just follow up with Suraj. Suraj, did you have something to add?
Yeah, one thing with regard to tailoring, with regard to institutions, but also keep in mind that teaching content and load differs a lot from department to department. The same course, like thermodynamics and stat mech in an engineering department is taught very differently compared to a physics department. And also the course load will vary even in a R1 university depending on a physics versus a math department, for instance. And the requirements are going to be very different. And so depending on which place one is applying to, you have to be cognizant of what and as Ray already mentioned, what the audience will be. So whether it's going to be primarily undergraduates, primarily grad students, what fraction of time you'll be spending teaching. The other thing is, I know I did include in my teaching statement some discussion on mentoring as well. And so if you have had any experience, one is I would suggest that if you get an opportunity to teach as a postdoc or help craft syllabus or give some lectures, then definitely try to do that. And try to also get some opportunities to mentor undergrad students or grad students, because mentoring philosophy is also an important thing which will come up later as well, even during your interview visit. So
yeah, that's
oh, go
ahead,
to follow up on a comment about, you said if you have experience mentoring, talk about that. That's something else that's important. Even if you don't have experience teaching in a classroom, try to draw on some of your experiences and talk about that to show that, like, you kind of have implemented these things, even if it's just like private tutoring or TAing or like mentoring someone in the lab, all these things, or like participating in outreach events or any of these things where you're like trying, you're teaching students. Speak to some of those experiences and then what you learned from those about like being an effective teacher.
Excellent. Great points. Thank you, Suraj and Ray.
One quick thing is be specific. And I think this is it's better to be specific about experiences in all the various statements and all aspects of the package.
Right. I think I completely agree. And as a search committee, you're looking for people who can be great mentors to graduate students in the program and the undergraduates. So this is certainly something to highlight. And then having specifics makes a big difference than some generic, I don't know, ChatGPT version of what is a teaching statement. So don't do that. Yes, that's another thing. All right. So next is, this is another factor that people tend to not take as seriously, which is the diversity statement. A lot of universities approach diversity and inclusion in faculty hiring kind of differently, but many of them do require diversity statements, and they are taken quite seriously at many institutions, including ours. And so one of the questions is, how can applicants actually demonstrate their commitment to these values? And, how can they draw on their own experiences and be specific about crafting such a diversity statement? I think the question is for Anand. Anand, do you want to take that?
Yeah. So this is very interesting, and it varies from institution to institution. But for sure, like as Ajay said at the University of California, the mission is to, serve the population of California. And if you look at the composition of the university, it doesn't match the composition of California. So there is at least some sort of objective, target. Whereas you agree that it should be the same one or not, that's something that obviously we could discuss further. But yeah, so basically this idea of the diversity statement has been introduced to identify not just people from underrepresented minorities, but people that are also committed to social justice, to having a diverse science environment. So and the rubrics are very well established and advertised. One of the problems is that it's becoming now something that you can have ChatGPT generate for you. Like, I think I'm not sure how successful it is at this point, because I think everybody has figured out how to game the system. But if you make things up, sooner or later, if you make it to the interview, things are going to come up. Because in our Chalk Talks, for example, we do spend time on the diversity statement. And so what I would say is that with all of this, specificity is the soul of credibility, in the sense that, you want to show that you understand what the issues are. If you can back them up with numbers, with publications, that's great. You want to show what you have done in the past to help, and again, you want to just put it in a way that connects to how you presented the problem. And then you want to use the chance to say, well, these are the sorts of things that I would be excited about doing over there. And it's not just being welcoming in the lab and all of that. I think what people are looking for is, like, there's all sorts of programs at each university. say, like this is part of doing your homework. What are the sort of things that you can see yourself being involved? Or if you have some other idea, what are the sort of things that you can see yourself starting with? So, that's from the standpoint of like writing the application. And then the question of how do you, what are the strategies that underrepresented groups can use to overcome barriers in the academic job market? It's tricky because we go back to the problem with networking, and with using networking too much as a measure of people notice you in the job search. Mm-hmm. I don't think I have a great answer other than it's important to overcome for all of us our imposter syndrome, and it's also important to leverage opportunities there are. Like there's all sorts of my colleague Aaron Streets with people at UCSF at Stanford are organizing this next generation symposium. We have a new one here that is focused on postdocs that are part of the Presidential Fellow Program. So there is a bunch of opportunities that people are paying attention to. I can tell you, I pay attention to those things. So I think it's just about putting yourself out there. And part of it is also, now I'm talking to myself and the faculty as mentors to make sure that all the people know about those opportunities.
Great. I think I agree 100%, Hernan. And I think I'll follow up with Jenny. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, I think for this one and for all of the statements, you have to be authentic. And it really, I think what Andrea was saying and also Saraj was saying was like, you have to be, like, it has to make sense for you. And you have to be authentic about it. There are going to be places and certain departments that do not have diversity already, that do not have a lot of things, but every department has some kind of diversity, even if it's first generation students or rural diversity versus city diversity, things like this. So I think whatever you have in your local area that you understand what kind of the different identities that are in your group, and you can demonstrate that you understand, in when you were a TA or, as when you are a mentor. So I actually think there's quite a bit of overlap between the teaching statement and the diversity statement, because the goal of for me in a lot of ways is to make new physicists, right? And we can't just say we're only going to select physicists from this type. That doesn't make sense for physics. That doesn't make sense for science. So you want to say, okay, so if we're going to make new physicists, we need to be able to take anybody and take them and turn them into a physicist. And therefore then that's where your inclusive practices come from in your research group as well as in your teaching. And so that really, I think some of the best diversity statements I've seen have really wrapped it also in with their teaching and their mentoring, because, you kind of really need that, right? That is where the place where we kind of, where you're starting to that's where we feed into the pipeline is from our teaching, right? Mm-hmm. And so you can be, I think, and I should say that Hernan is right and we'll talk about the interview process also, but I would say that we don't have a chalk talk. We have something we call a round table, and the round table is mostly focused on the non-research aspects of the job, which includes mentoring and teaching. And if we're at your round table, or if you're meeting with me as department chair and I say something like, what do you think about teaching? I don't expect you to actually know everything. Okay. I expect you to be open, but if you don't realize that teaching is part of your job, that's a big problem. That has actually happened since I've been department chair. And if you don't understand that Syracuse University does have double the national average of Black and Latino students at the undergraduate and graduate level, that's going to be a problem, because that is something that we're working on and we're building really a lot. And so, we want the people who we're hiring to care about these things, because we care about these things, right? You don't even have to know about every single program we offer, but, again, realizing that most departments are valuing these things, and each department is kind of doing different things for that, I think. And then how you authentically can work with, bringing your experiences to work with what we are trying to do in our department. I think that's pretty important.
That's perfect. I think, again, being specific about your experiences, getting some experiences with resources at your institution, like Hernan said, and as Jenny and Suraj also pointed out, you want to connect that your experiences to the local environment that you're going into. So how will you contribute to the institution that you're applying to? Great, thank you so much for all those fantastic answers. What we're going to do next is talk, this is a very broad question, but this is generically about the interview process, which we refer to as the kind of the main thing, which is the campus visit, let's say. It could be preceded by kind of a Zoom interview. Typically they are. And so one of the questions, I think, is for Suraj, since he's done it quite recently. What kind of questions could you expect? How would you prepare for this interview? Suraj?
So, okay, so the interview process is complicated in the sense that it can vary again from place to place and department to department, but roughly, as has already been mentioned quite a few times, there's two parts roughly. The first is like a shorter get to know you phone or Zoom interview, and those being much shorter are oftentimes just with the committee, and they give you the questions that are often going to be asked in advance, so you get a chance to prepare. And so you should make sure you have answers that are concise because you have limited amount of time. And for the campus visit, roughly the breakup is it's usually a 1 to 2 day visit, and I'm talking at least in the from my experience with R1 universities. I'm sure others can fill in for other places, and usually the things that are part of the 1 to 2 day visit, there's a job talk, which is typically sort of an overview of what all you've done and an outlook for what you're going to do in the future. At the sort of colloquium level, a chalk talk, which was also brought up earlier in this discussion, discussing and highlighting your vision for the future and how you're going to achieve it. So mentioning a little bit about what you've thought about in terms of the research strategy, but also funding, and then consequently, this is oftentimes a longer discussion, as Jenny also mentioned, which will involve attitudes towards your teaching philosophy, mentoring, and other services in the department. Sometimes there can be a dedicated teaching demo, depending on the place and university and department. Then there's oftentimes meetings with individual faculty, deans, then a meeting with students, and again, depending on the place, a meeting with the DEIJ committee. And culminating all of this, typically on the first day, there's a social dinner with other faculty. So that's sort of the overall spread of the event. Schedules are often given in advance. If you don't get it, ask for it. Ask who will be in the chalk talk, so you know. And if there are again set questions, ask if you have some, so you can prepare in advance. The visit is often very hectic and very stressful, and you oftentimes don't get too many breaks. So make sure you take care of yourself, hydrate and eat, and carry something to keep energized. Familiarize yourself with people you will be meeting. Look up faculty and what they do, so you can and figure out connections with your own research and other interests, so you can highlight that and bring that up when you meet them. And practice. So in terms of your job and chalk talk, practice in advance with colleagues, with mentors. Try to see with other friends of yours who are also in the job market. So it's useful to have multiple eyes and ears on and perspectives on different versions of jobs and chalk talks. And what else did I want to say? And yeah, I think this is the rough spread of things. In terms of I want to mention two resources that I found very helpful. One is actually a blog that Jenny Ross hosts and writes, which is Women of Science, which I found very, very useful for myself in terms of all the resources that are highlighted for applications, for interviews, but also for other things in navigating academia. And another, which may be useful for some people and may not for others, is Future PI Slack. It's a Slack channel with a large number of postdocs and people from various different backgrounds, ranging from, biology on the medical side to biophysics and engineering, applying for faculty positions. So it's a nice community and resource for asking all sorts of questions and sort of crowdsourcing information and just having a community to know that you're not alone in this process, because it is a stressful time. So those would be, and yes, at the end of your visit and your interviews, do send thank you notes, because it's a lot of work and time and commitment on both sides. So it's good to acknowledge that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Surya. That was a great summary and a great set of to-do points. Oh, no worries, Andrea. We'll see you later. So I think I was just going to ask, yeah, we're also almost at the end of time, but we will just, I think, Nancy, is it okay if we stay on a little bit longer? Some people might have to leave, though.
Yeah, it's totally fine. The recording will keep going.
Okay.
But it's up to you how long you and the panelists can.
Yeah, and we'll try to wrap it up quickly, but yeah, Suraj, thank you very much for that very detailed outlook. And I would like to, invite Ray to follow up on that about the interview process, especially as there are differences between different kinds of institutions.
Yeah, and I'll try to be brief, and Suraj did an awesome job of covering most of the details. But yeah, so I guess in the pre-visit, when you have like a Zoom call or a phone call interview, like Suraj says, it's really important. You don't have much time, and sometimes like you don't see their faces. Sometimes it's just on the phone or over Zoom. So just make sure you prepare that, be able to describe your research in like 2 minutes. And like, if they ask you about your teaching philosophy, like you can describe those things in like 2 minutes. And so just practice that a lot, because you don't have a lot of time, and that's determining like whether or not you get an interview at the next step. And so again, that's another thing where point out like that you've done your homework, and say something when they ask you a question, like, maybe they ask you just like, why do you want this position? Explain why you want to be at that university. And so I think that's really important. And again, yeah, sending the thank you notes. But yeah, just be, I guess also you don't have much time, but make sure you have a well thought out answer, because another sort of red flag is when your response is like 10 seconds long, because then it's not like, well, yeah. So again, practice. And for universities that are more like teaching focused, you will have to do like a demo lecture. And sometimes they tell you the topic, sometimes you can pick. So just make sure that you've kind of, prepare for that, and just prepare for your audience, figure out who all you're going to be meeting with. And they are long and exhausting. But yeah,
all right.
That's
thanks, Ray. Arnaud, you have your hand up.
Just quickly, like again, the preparation is important. Like one thing that I think is useful too is to have a short version of your talk, because you're going to encounter a lot of people in interviews that say, well, they couldn't make it to your thing, and you want to have it like, so, anything that shows preparation, getting to know the PIs beforehand, like, doing the reading and maybe looking at a few papers. So you got, even at the level of an icebreaker, when you get into a meeting, those types of things are useful. And also one thing that I found very useful was to have an obscene amount of supplementary slides, like try to predict what the questions are going to be. And as you practice, you'll get better at that, and then have them ready, because it makes such a difference when you can quickly say, well, that's a good question, let me show you this, and then you can go back. It keeps you on point.
Yes, practice, exactly. All right, thank you very much to all of you.
I need to run to another meeting.
Yeah, so I think
now,
we are at
thank
time.
You, everyone.
It's 11 o'clock. So I would suggest we concluded the portion about the interview process. We were going to talk about negotiating offers. And so if people need to leave, that's okay. We'll keep those who can stay from the panel, please do. And we can talk about these things in a little bit, because this will be recorded and posted. So students will have access to this. It'll be helpful to them. So if you don't mind, we can continue for a few more minutes and maybe take a few questions at the end. All right, so was there anything else somebody wanted to say about the interview process? If not, I'll go on to the next
I just
one.
want to add one thing,
Yeah.
is
No,
that
go
it's these are 2 days, they are exhausting, but if you can't behave well for 2 days, people are not going to hire you. Like, so, I mean, this is what Hernan was saying earlier. Like, if you, like, we're looking for a colleague, like somebody's going to live with us for 30 years, right? Like, if you cannot keep your stuff together and be a normal person for 2 days and not mistreat people while you're here, then we're not going to hire you. So this is actually, I mean, it is going both ways too. You're also interviewing us, and so we can also need to be on our best behavior. But you know, we're this is what people like mean when they say fit. What they shouldn't mean is like we're looking for a certain kind of exact person. What it does mean is like, will you actually fit in with our community? Because like, at least at Syracuse, we've been really working on community building, and I don't want to hire people who are going to actually destroy the community, because it really only does take one bad apple, right, to like harm a community. Like one person can derail like a faculty meeting or whatever. So, you know, we're looking for people who are really capable of helping us and moving us to that next level. We have vision too for our department. And so, you know, yeah, and it's surprising how many people can't hold it together for 2 days.
All right, thanks, Jenny. All right. So then, assuming you held it together for 2 days and you actually made it past the committee and they actually want to make you an offer. So one of the things that, you know, next comes up is negotiating offers. And I think you have the lead on this, Jenny. So what are the key elements like of a job offer? You know, how should applicants negotiate for the best package? And what are some pitfalls, you know, to avoid during this negotiation process?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think different chairs probably do it differently, but the way that I see my job as the chair is, first of all, I'm the go-between, I'm the intermediate, I'm the middleman on this process. So I don't have the money, I don't have the purse. The dean has the purse in our case, right? But you want the money, the dean has the money, and I'm the person in between. And it is my goal actually to get what you need in order to get you started. But that means you need to justify it. You can't just ask me for $2 million. That is not going to fly. You need to. So what I'm going to ask you for, and I will give to you, is a spreadsheet that says, here's how much a grad student costs. Here's how much a postdoc typically costs. Here's how much an undergrad costs. You know, think about your summer salary, think about the equipment you need, and go on and spend a week and figure it all out. If you can come with that, even better. But I will send you away from the in-person visit. I send everybody away with a spreadsheet that has all of this listed, so that if you are the person, we can immediately start. And I already know what this stuff is. I already know, and I can go to the dean as soon as we know that you're our person. Before we even tell you, I can go talk to the dean and say, I know that this person's going to be $1.2 million also. That's what they're going to need. And that way I can get the dean kind of ready for that before we really start negotiating. And so that should be everything you really, really need. Now, the dean might come back and be like, that is a non-starter for me. This is a theorist. Why do they need $1.2 million? Right. And so then I will have to go and, like, you know, I even give you space to justify it. And so, like, if, you know, I might have to come back and say, okay, which of these things are things that we might be able to share with other people, like, or they might be part of a center that we could, like, you know, make it as part of an equipment for a center. Or, you know, oh, you were putting all this computing equipment. Well, are you aware of the computing resources that we have on campus, right? And so I might come back and say, like, okay, which of these things? And so we're going to end up kind of we're, you know, hopefully you might start higher. You should start with your wildest dream for what you want. If we're an R1, so you should do that with us. But then the dean's going to come in here, and then we're going to work until we can get together. But what you should never do is don't accept something that you can't actually work with, right? So if it really is, like, if you are an imaging person and you really need a spinning disc confocal, we have to get that for you, right? And you need to make that case that it's not something you can share. It's something you're going to be using 24/7, that everybody in your lab is going to want. And maybe after you get your R01 or your Mira, you're going to put in an equipment supplement for a second one, because that's how much you're going to use it, right? that's what we need to be able to say, so that we can say, like, this is definitely a thing that is needed. We have to have this. I know it's expensive, but we need this, right? You don't need to put it in for an ice machine, right? Talk to the different places. Different places have different things. Like, are you going to need to buy your own office furniture? Or if you want, maybe you just get a standard metal desk, but if you want actually a standing desk, you might have to put in money for it. You might want to know about that. Maybe it's not something you list, but it's something that you have to keep in mind. I try not to do that, but every now and then somebody wants something really specialty, like a leather couch. I'm gonna have you use your startup for the leather couch. Like, I'll get you your normal standard stuff, but for the leather couch, not so much, so but if that's what you really need, because you have to take a 3 o'clock nap every day, then maybe you need it. Put it in and be like, I need this for my startup. I have to have it in there because I have to buy it. So I think you have to walk that line between seeming like you have to be able to justify it. And again, it has to be authentic. Like, you can't ask for a cryo-EM but you've only done light microscopy before. That doesn't make any sense, right? Again, it's got to reflect you and what you're doing.
Great. Okay, thanks, Jenny. I was going to ask Andrea to follow up, or Ray to follow up, but not Andrea. Okay, they're both left, so I think I can follow up. And Hernan has raised his hand, so I will let him follow up.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, it's important to remember that you're negotiating with your future colleagues. So you don't want to piss people off, right? You want to make sure that, at every point you're grateful and you're trying to be an ally. Yeah, to me, that's super important. Like, this is a negotiation, but you're not trying to buy a used car.
Yeah, that's certainly important to keep in mind. And usually the department chair or the search committee chair, or whoever you're negotiating with, is your ally. They want to see you succeed as well. If you don't want to hire somebody, and then, undercut them, give them the worst possible stuff, because we are hiring a colleague who we want to succeed. So it's important to keep that in mind and to try to be flexible, try to meet some of the things that, that you could do with shared equipment or something, just to make it easier. It will go a long way, being flexible.
And then the second thing I want to say, and this is particularly important at a place that is so expensive as the Bay Area, which is that you got to do the math. You got to do the math. Like, if you're planning on having kids, how much it is to have a kid. If you're planning to buy a house, how much it is to buy a house, what distance, like all those things you need to do yourself. And, obviously you can ask other assistant professors, but this is it in terms of your salary and in terms of, your housing support for the next 5, 6, 7 years. So you got to be thinking really hard about it. And I know there's less room for maneuverings often as an assistant professor, but you got to make sure that, you're going to be in a good place, both personally and professionally to do well.
And then I'm following on that, actually, I was going to say this, but people seem to have different opinions about this, but I'll throw this out to the panel. I mean, what about, you're a dual career couple, right? And, at what point do you bring up that you have a significant other partner who needs a job and you have a family? What time do you bring that up, and how do you work that in the negotiation? Whoever wants to go, maybe.
So
Jenny.
I will go, because I have this issue myself, and I've navigated it myself personally a couple of times, and then also from the other side. I think from the side of the person who's being interviewed, as much as I'd like to say that every physics department is totally good, and even if you told them about this, like, it would not hurt you, that's probably not true everywhere. Just gonna be honest. So if you tell people early on that you have a 2-body issue, and there are going to be some departments probably still to this day who might still ding you for it. Now, but what if you hear that you are the top candidate and now it's time to negotiate? This is it. This is one of your negotiating points, right? And being able to bring in your significant other is very likely one of your negotiating points. And so, and you hopefully have already talked with your significant other about, what they can endure and what you can both handle, what you expect. But then you need to be honest, and you need to say, if you can't get me 2 positions at X level, I will not go here. And then you have to be able to be able to do that. And so, and even if it means you say no to every offer that year, then that has to be maybe something you can say. And so, I think that, again, it's about being authentic to yourself and your spouse, you know, and I had people my first time out on the job market, and at the point that they understood that I had a 2-body problem, and some were like, well, you should just come here anyways. And I was like, no, I refuse to do that to my partner. I won't do that. We've made a choice that we won't do that. This is our first time on the job market. We have lots of years to be on the job market together in the future. we will continue to be on the job market until we can get something. And I was lucky that I had multiple offers that I was able to play off of each other. And I did do a lot of behind the scenes work where I talked to other women in the university that I had met. I networked during my interviews. I met women who I knew had 2-body problems and who had solved them at those universities on my interview. And when I knew I had the offer, I called those women. I said, how did you figure this out? How did this work for you? And then, you know, it was all different for everybody. And then I knew, well, okay, it's going to be different for me too. And I will have to figure it out. And so by getting in touch with the right person, I was able to help my own department, what ended up being my future department, come to an ability, because my department, the physics department, had never done this before, but the chemistry department had, right? And other bio departments had, and people I had met in those other departments had this solved for them, which meant it was possible, right? Just physics didn't know how to do it. And so I actually helped physics figure out how to do it as the candidate. And so, you know, that I'm not saying it should be 100% your responsibility, but I am saying that much like everything else, this is a place where you might have some control. And so when Ajay was like, things you have control over and things you don't, this can be something that you could help by helping your department get into contact with people who are at the university who've done those kinds of things previously. And so I did that, right?
Right. That is great. Yeah. Yeah. And I would also agree that, you know, that is something that you can control to a certain extent. I would also say that, you know, you have to realize that coming up with a new offer is a time-consuming process. So you have to give the committee or the university enough of an opportunity to actually make a good faith effort and get another line for you. So sometimes you would see somebody at the very, very last stage, you know, just at the very end, they're about to sign up on the dotted line. They're like, oh, actually, I have another. Okay, great. It would have been great if you had known this before. We could have made an effort to get another position. So it's a balancing act for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, knowing other people at the institution who have gone through this before would certainly help.
Yeah, I would say at the point where you are being told, like, we're going to start negotiating, that's a good time, because this now becomes part of your negotiation. And then you don't have to worry, you know, you were the top choice, and it has nothing to do, it's not reflective of your significant other situation. But at the same time, now you're giving them enough time. Hopefully they're coming to you with an offer in March. Remember the timeline that Ajay showed, right? A lot of people end up signing in May. And so, you know, you've got 2 months then. You're giving, like, if you're talking to them in March, April, they've got now time for you to sign by the end of the semester, which is usually when people want to kind of lock people down.
Yeah, that's great. All right, I think we're down to the last question, and that is for Hernan about, you know, something quite unique, which is international considerations. So I think question is, you know, what are unique challenges and opportunities for international applicants who may be seeking faculty positions here, you know, and that their visa immigration considerations, you know, how should potential faculty members prepare for it?
Yeah. So, you know, my experience was of doing grad school and a postdoc here. You know, the looking for the international consideration only had to do with visa stuff, but you know, they take care of that at most institutions. Sponsor your green card, as far as I can tell. So
certainly,
I think the challenge for people coming from outside the country where they haven't done a postdoc here or grad school here, it's a little bit related to the networking aspect. So that I think one needs to be proactive once again.
Right.
I don't
and
have
again, again, I think the only thing I would say is get in contact with it could be usually after your, you know, interview process, you have an offer, but during that process, do try to find out about, you know, the international office, what are the documentation they will need, what kind of visa they're going to sponsor you on, how long. Sometimes they will take it out of your startup, you know, the processing fees. These are, you know, considerations that you want to actually bring up, actually find out the details about. But typically the university will take care of these things for you, but you should be in the know. You should know what timescales you're looking at. So that's just a word of caution about being on top of it, but that's it. Well, I think that's the end of it. And I would like to thank all our panelists. We have Jenny and Hernan here. Thank you to Suraj and Ray and Andrea as well. And thank you to all the participants who are here. If there are any couple of questions we can take, maybe in the next 5 minutes or so, we are happy to do so. People can just either unmute themselves if there are burning questions, or raise your hands. And if not, I don't see any. So I think we were complete. Oh, there is a question. Hello.
Hello. Yeah, I have a question. And I'm Shantidan. So I have a question about the research statement. So some applications require research statement, some applications require research plan and statement. So what is the difference between the two? And also, how much should we write about our past experiences, like our PhD and postdoc experiences in our research statement?
Okay, yeah. I can start by just saying that, typically we ask for one thing, which is a research statement, but there may be places that ask for both. If they're distinguishing between plans and statement, I would then, because typically a research statement has both. You're putting down what your experiences are, what you have contributed, and how you're going to build from that into your future as a PI, right? So it would contain both your past research and your future plans. And then if you have a statement and plan separately, I would say you would just break that up, and that would be the only thing you would have to worry about. But if anybody wants to follow or not, or
I think you just you need to use that to establish credibility, to establish, I can get things done. And if you can make it part of the narrative, of how that informs your research program, that's even better. And that, I think, goes back to Andrea's suggestion.
Yeah. Excellent. Suraj, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. So I know I'm at very early age, so I am doing my second year or third year in PhD. But when is the right time, if someone is interested to go into an academia, when is the right time to start thinking about their research and how it's going to lead to their academic job? Does the work in PhD really matter when it comes to applying for faculty positions?
Yeah, good. Jenny, Hernan, any comments?
Sorry, it went my thing went out just as you were saying.
I think he was just asking.
Can you repeat it again? The question?
PhD work is important, and at what point should you start thinking about how your research lead to a PI job?
I think that in my general rule of thumb is whatever position you're in right now, you should be thinking about and starting to act like the next thing. And so most R1s will require, and most PUIs now require a postdoc. So when you're a PhD student, you need to be looking at postdocs and saying, like, how do they act, and start acting like them. And in particular, postdocs are more independent, right? Postdocs come up with their own ideas. Sometimes they're bad. It doesn't matter. There's lots of ideas in the world. Many times they're bad. They're bad. They're not going to work. Doesn't matter. The point is you're starting to generate. You need to be starting to generate ideas, because that's what PIs do. And so that's what, you start doing that as a postdoc. I think, also being independent about like the next step of your project and things like this, right? Really, and then, or what are the things that could be analyzed in this project? Becoming more independent about writing your papers, right? Talking to people, both postdocs who are there and your PI or other PIs about grant writing. That's a major part of being a faculty member, is writing proposals. And so, talking about that process, starting to understand what is it like to be a postdoc, and then also what is it like to be a professor, and kind of trying to understand what the job is. I think in general, that's true. I think in our field, it's much more obvious because you're actually interacting with these people regularly. It's not like you're in the mailroom and you want to be a CEO and you never see the CEO, right? Like you're seeing those next levels, and hopefully, you know, they might not offer you the information, but you can always ask. I think also we talked about networking, but I think your peer network. I mean, some of my biggest helpers in my network are people who are exactly the same level as me, who maybe went up for a job a year ahead of me or a year after me, but they had just written these statements and then they had them so that I could see what they look like, you know, and things like that. And so I think, you know, talking to your local community, like what would I do when I'm a professor? How will I treat my students? What will I do to make sure that everybody's on the same page and I'm able to, you know, get my team moving forward and get my experience? What is the first piece of equipment I would buy as a professor? Just having those conversations over beers, you know, or over ice cream, just with your peers right now, allows you to kind of start to, you know, to design these things.
Yeah, it's great. Well, thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Hernan, and thank you to everybody who's here. You're already well over time, so we're gonna have to stop at some point. So thanks to everyone, and I will let Nancy close us out.
Sure.
Or Nancy's gone. Okay.
No, I am here. I've been just listening silently and thinking what an amazing discussion this has been. And I'm so happy it's being recorded and posted, because I'm going to send a link to this to every single person who comes and asks me for advice on applying for faculty positions, because I think we've had such a wealth of experience and shared that gives amazing insight into the process and makes this information accessible to everybody, no matter who you know, right? So thank you very much, everyone, for coming, and particularly to the panelists for your insight, and to Ajay for really taking us through the process. And hope to see some of the people in attendance at our non-academic careers event next time.
All right. Thank you, Nancy. And thanks to the panel. Thanks to everyone. Bye.